Welcome again. My name is Moketi Mugoni, and I welcome you to the NYS training session. We had mentioned last week during the briefing that there are quite some documentations and kind of applications that you would need to familiarize yourself as you are applying. So we have set aside today to really cover all that in terms of what you need to complete your application, from completing the online form to completing the ABC PIMP, which my colleagues will familiarize you with what exactly is required. As you're entering the room, colleagues, just a few house rules. We'll adopt the same approach we did last week with the briefing session. You will be muted, and you are welcome to share your questions and comments in the chat room. So in the chat boxes, and we will be responding throughout the sessions. As I mentioned, colleagues, this will be a full day, but it will be broken down in several segments. We will be going through an overview of today's session, and we'll start with a welcome by the head of the Jobs Fund, Nadra, and then it will be broken up in terms of different sections, the timelines that we should consider, and then we'll get into the monitoring and evaluation, all the way up until finance and compliance issues. There will be breaks, colleagues. We'll have our first tea break at around 10, and then we'll continue throughout and have lunch later on, and there'll be another tea break towards the end of the day. I'm just gonna start by, I'm gonna welcome the head of the Jobs Fund, Nadra, who is the DDG for Employment Facilitation at National Treasury. And Nadra will give us a welcome. And after Nadra, I will ask my colleague Fidelis to also come and give us an overview of the application process and timelines. Nadra? Is Nadra on the line? Colleagues, we are also mindful of some connectivity issues as various parts of the country are having a I almost said lockdown. I'm just gonna wait for a few minutes. Nadra is just connecting and she will come on board shortly and give us an overview of today's welcome. There she is. Nadra?
Hi, good morning, everybody. I hope that you are all well. I want to firstly say thank you so very much for making the time. A day to spend in a training session is a really long time, but I am encouraged that you're making yourselves available to do that. This is very important to us. We really do want our applicants to have the best chance of submitting a very, very competitive application. And that is why we want to take the time to work with you through the application form. Now, at the beginning, you would say, why are these people making this so very complicated? Well, you know, if we had left it as an open process, if we had left it to people just to submit their proposals in, in whichever form they felt was appropriate, it would then be very difficult to competitively assess the applications. And it's for this reason that we have a template, we have a budget template, etc., etc. In that way, we have all the applicants answering all the exact same questions, and we are then able to assess, who has the
There seems to have been connectivity issues there, colleagues. Nadra, you are muted.
Okay, I think that there's a problem. I am not touching my machine and I'm getting muted automatically. Anyway, I just wanted to make sure that people understand why we are going through this process, why it is important to participate in the training, why it is important to ask as many questions as you possibly can to fully understand. One of the documents that you're going to be asked to complete is the ABC PIMP, and you are going to go, oh my word, what is this about? I can assure you that this is going to be your friend, because if you are selected as a successful applicant, that particular document is going to clearly set out what your plan is, when you're going to achieve things, what it's going to cost, and that is going to be the key tool that we would be using to monitor your progress. So yes, it's going to be a long day. I hope that you have other team members that will tag in for you when you're getting a little bit tired, but I wish everything of the very best, and also the very best to you as you submit your applications. One last thing, after this training, do not be demoralized, okay? Please, please, please don't, because without quality applications, we will not be able to respond to the president's call. We will not be able to make a contribution to getting youth into the economy. So it's really important. You know, this is not about us as the fund manager. This really is about you being at the coal face and making a difference. So I encourage you, as soon as this training is over, please start completing your application forms so that we in turn can then do the assessments, and we wish you the very best and success in your applications. Thanks, Mo, over to you.
Thank you very much, Najwa. Colleagues, that is Najwa, the head of the Jobs Fund. Thank you for a very warm welcome, Najwa. I think we've just mentioned that some colleagues may have a slow connectivity issues with load shedding throughout various parts of the country. Colleagues, Najwa also emphasized that it is going to be a long day. So we do hope that you are not alone. You have your colleagues with you that will be able to also tag along, and you will be all together be able to understand the content of today's training. I'm going to hand over to Fidelis. Fidelis, are you there? He will give us an overview of the timelines and the application process. Fidelis is the technical lead responsible for the presidential youth employment on our side. Fidelis, over to you.
Thanks, Moketi, and good morning, everyone. So what I'll do is I'll just speak to high-level timeframes. Much of this you would have seen if you attended last week's briefing sessions, but I think it's worth us recapping that. And then I will explain in slightly more detail what the next couple of weeks will look like. So in terms of the overall plan, you can see that there are 6 basic phases to the rollout of the program. We are currently at the first phase, which is the launch of the round, where we have applications coming in. And here again, we'll stress that deadline, 25 November. And also to stress that you absolutely need to get as many of your resources working on this application form as soon as possible. As the DDG indicated, we're here to help, but I think your success is really going to be determined by how much time and effort you and your teams actually put into it. So there's an online portal on which I would imagine all of you have already registered, and that's where you're supposed to submit your application. And there's a segment that we're going to present to you later on, where we will go into the details of how that application portal actually works and how the application form itself works. It's a one-stage process, as we indicated last week, but that means that once the application window closes on the 25th, we, the fund, will start appraising these applications. And that process involves a lot of engagements with applicants so that we make sure that we capture your application in the most accurate form possible. And we put you in good stead when the IC, the investment committee, which is an independent committee, eventually looks at all applications and makes decisions on the allocation of the funding. I think in the briefing sessions, we emphasize that young people are expected to be engaged in meaningful community service activities for a period of 6 months. Then after that, we'll have closeout and evaluation activities ending about, I think, maybe November, December, depending on when you actually contract. So that's the high level program plan in terms of the timing of different phases. Now we can move on to the next slide and talk about what the next couple of months might look like. Today is the one training session, so 10 November. What we plan to do is to make sure that all the segments that we're going to present today are available online, so that even if there are potential applicants out there who couldn't make it today, they will be able to access those resources. As I've mentioned already, 25 November, the application window will close. And as we'll explain during today's session, your application should include, obviously, the online application form that you would have completed. But there are also some attachments or tools that help us understand your initiative better, and that also enhance our process of appraising and stacking up applications against each other. I think we emphasize the point in the briefing sessions that we're actually running a competitive process. So we want to get the best applications approved by the investment committee. So these are some of the tools that we would want you to upload. The ABC PIMP will be explained a little bit later in terms of what those acronyms mean. There might be giggles as you read it now, but I promise you it actually makes sense. Then there are due diligence documents that we will require you to provide as well when you submit your application form. Then 2 weeks after the application window closes, we will then inform applicants of their eligibility status. So those who are ineligible will be told that much, and those who are eligible to proceed to the next phase, we will communicate what the next steps actually entail. And that will really involve us planning when we will be able to have due diligence engagements. And these will be virtual predominantly, but based on what we're seeing in your application form, we might actually plan for on-site visits, so we actually see what's going on the ground. At that stage, each applicant will be allocated a project team from the fund, and the leader of this team will be your key point of contact. So they'll be engaging you to make all these arrangements or to request additional information, etc. But our ethos as a fund is that when we now have identified team members from our side and from your side as the applicant, we try and keep all team members in copy with all communication. I think that level of transparency assists, but you will be given a key point of contact, a project lead, if you like. The one thing to flag about the process we're running is that it's obviously going to overlap the December and January period. On our side, we'll be working flat out, obviously with the exception of public holidays. And we are encouraging applicants to be responsive to queries over that period, because it's going to be one of the key factors that determine how quickly we roll out and how quickly we actually get young people active in communities and earning stipends. So I think that's going to be an important aspect that we will need to negotiate as partners in this process. The actual due diligence engagements tentatively were looking at the first few weeks of January in terms of when those will be held. The one thing to point out, which we'll keep emphasizing throughout, and which I think the DDG has also pointed out, is that we will be available to provide assistance as you progress through the different stages, even after that due diligence exercise has been concluded, because we are really looking to present your project in a way that that supports the work you want to do, and that gives the investment committee an accurate appreciation of what you're trying to do. We're here to help, but I must point out that the timelines and dates I've been speaking to are indicative. And the reason why we can't commit to specific dates today, obviously no one knows what the future holds, but the key factor here is that the actual timing will depend on the number of applications that we receive on the 25th of November, when the application window closes. So we will be communicating more specific dates and processes when the application window actually closes. So I think on that note, Chair, we can pause for any questions before we proceed to hear more from Kath about some of the tools that we will be using. Chair?
Thank you very much, Fidelis. Sorry, colleagues. I'm going to remain with my video off so that I do not interfere with connectivity. Colleagues, are there any questions that you would like to pose or comments? I'm looking in the chats. Lerato has emphasized that the presentation, today's session, and the recording will be available on the Jobs Fund website. Are there any questions regarding the overview that Fidelis has reiterated, particularly around the timelines and the availability of the prospective applicants during the December and early January holiday break? That is very important, colleagues. I think, as he emphasized, it is during that time that it matters the kind of information that you are being asked and that you are able to respond in time. Fidelis, I think it's safe to say that there are no questions on your section. Thank you, colleagues. I'm going to hand over to Catherine Bernard, and Catherine will give us an overview of the ABC PIMP. Kath, what is the PIMP? Thank you.
Hi everyone, this section provides a high-level overview of the ABC PIMP, and more detail will be provided in the segments that follow. So really this is just an overview. So the Jobs Fund, as the fund manager for PYEI, requires a rational budgeting approach. And this is really required to understand how a project aims to structure their project activities, the associated budgets that will be spent, that ultimately will achieve the proposed project outcomes. So this tool, the Activity-Based Costing Project Implementation Monitoring Plan, aka the ABC PIMP tool, aims to assist projects in determining the activities a project will undertake, and then the costs and outputs associated with those activities. So at the end of the development of the ABC PIMP, the following key questions will be answered for the proposed project. So the first question that will be answered is, what will the project produce and when? When will the activities actually take place in terms of timing? When will the related costs be incurred? What is the overall project cost? How will these costs be financed? So who is going to fund this? And then what are the project's overall objectives and when will this be achieved? So the tool is really an Excel-based tool. It's based on your standard results chain format, and it cycles through the project inputs, activities, outputs, and outcomes. But in addition to your typical results chain, this tool weaves in the timing of activities, outputs, outcomes, and then the costing thereof. So if we look at our normal results chain, we'll cycle through our activities. So what activities will the project undertake to finally reach our end goals? What are the outputs? What do we anticipate happening as a result of all these activities we've undertaken? What are we expecting and when will we expect it? Then if we look at the costing, the PIMP will then cost each activity that needs to be undertaken, as well as include the sources of funding. Where will the funding come from? Is it from grant funding? Is it from match funding? And the PIMP will then also map out the timing of these budget requirements throughout implementation. Finally, the PIMP also outlines the outcomes. So what are the end goals? And it also, once again, includes the timing of the outcome realization. So it cycles through your traditional results chain, but it also includes details about timing of deliverables and then itemized costing for the project activities. So the PIMP consists of 8 tabs, but only 4 of which need to be completed by the applicant. So in this presentation, I just want to focus on the 4 that applicants need to complete. One thing, however, that I want to bring up before we move on, it's really important in the review process and when you submit your ABC PIMPs to the fund manager, that you do keep track of version control. This is really important to make sure that both the fund manager as well as the applicant have the most up-to-date version and that we don't lose any information along the way. So the 4 tabs that I'm going to focus on are tab 1, the project information tab, tab 2, the project implementation plan or results chain, tab 3 contains the financing plan, and then finally tab 4 contains the funding allocation. So if we look at tab 1, you'll notice there's some yellow shaded cells there. And throughout the ABC PIMP tool in Excel, you'll see these yellow shaded cells, and that marks the cells that the applicants actually need to complete. So on the project information page or tab, this requires applicants to detail general project information. So it includes the project description. It also includes things like the anticipated start and end dates. So it's really important that projects complete this tab and make sure it's up to date, because some of the information will then pull into the summary tabs that follow. So moving on to tab 2, this really maps out your project activities, your outputs, your costs, and finally your outcomes. So this is what the worksheet looks like from the far left to the far right. At the moment you can't really see anything and it's distorted, but I wanted to show you what it really looks like from a bird's eye view. So you would scroll from left to right to complete various things. So on the far left, we've got our activities, our outputs, and then of course the timing thereof. So we list the project activities. What will the project do to ensure that we reach those end goals? Then out of those activities, outputs will emerge. from those activities. So what is it by undertaking certain activities? What are we anticipating the output to be? So a simple example is if we want to recruit and onboard young people, and we decide to put out advertisements in community newspapers, our outputs are simply the number of adverts issued in community papers. And then we would get a sense of, so when do we want to send these adverts out? Is it in month 1, month 2? How many adverts do we want to send out? And that would really come in the timing of the activities and outputs and the quantum. How many do we expect to see in terms of that output? Then when we go towards the center of this view, you'll see this is where the activity-based costing section starts. And that's really about listing. So what are the costs associated with each activity? So if I put an advert out in a community newspaper, how much will that cost me or the project? So we need to start listing what sort of budgetary requirements do we need and what are we going to spend the money on funding. Then on the far right, we have the timing of the budget expenditure. And that's really what is referred to as the implementation schedule. But it'll give the timing and the breakdown of the cost incurred for each item in each activity. So if we use that advertisement example again, the timing of the budget, maybe we would spend 70,000 in month 1 to place ads in 10 different community papers. And perhaps in month 2, we spend half of that and we only advertise in 5 community papers. So you would set out the timing of your expenditure in that way. So these 3 areas, the activities and the outputs, and then the second area, the costing and the timing of the budget, I will discuss in the slides that follow in a little bit more detail. So we'll start out with the activities and outputs. So applicants are required to identify key categories of activities that their projects will undertake to reach the end goal. So as I mentioned earlier, this could be the recruitment and onboarding of young people into a program. It could mean the training of these young people. It could mean allocating young people service work according to their aptitude, or perhaps it's also about forming partnerships with other organizations to secure further opportunities for young people. So an activity category could consist of those broad activities. But then each activity revolves around a set of sub-activities where we would detail exactly how, for example, we would recruit young people. So those are our sub-activities. So now each activity as well, we would expect to see a specific output from the activity category or outputs. So as I mentioned earlier, perhaps in terms of the recruitment of young people, one of those outputs may be the number of applications received from potential candidates for the initiative. So that is an output that would emerge from that particular activity category. Applicants must also highlight an overall milestone output for each activity category. And this really highlights the milestone that will be reached once all those activities, if you had to list 6 activities in that activity category 1, this really looks at, so what milestone will be reached once all of those activities are undertaken. And with the PIMP, what will happen is this milestone output will then be pulled into the outcome section in the PIMP. But we'll further discuss that outcome section a bit later. You'll also see from this section, it's really important for applicants to show the timing of their outputs. So if it's number of adverts placed, when are you going to place them? How many? How many applicants do you expect to receive in month 1? How many applications in month 2? So you'll see you begin to plot the timing of delivery for different activities within your project. So now if we refer back to our results chain, we'll see here in terms of what we've mapped in the PIMP thus far. We've covered the activity section and we've covered the output section. So now still under tab 2, I want to move on now to costing. So the activity-based costing section requires that the applicant cost each activity. How much will it cost? And to also then show the basis for this costing. Why am I putting this amount as the cost for adverts, for placing adverts? What is the assumption behind that costing? So we're really trying to answer the question here, what will the activities cost us as we continue to implement? So applicants are firstly required to highlight the costs incurred, give a description of that cost. So you'll see there in the project cost description. They're also required to classify the cost as per the SCOA code. And they also need to say, so what is the quantum of that cost? Give some detail on potential escalation in terms of inflation or any sort of cost adjustments that would be incurred, as well as I said, the cost assumptions. How did you come up with that cost in the first place? As seen on the slide here, this costing is directly aligned with the activity, so it's listed on the same row. So as we move from left to right, we've gone through the activities, the outputs, and now we're going to the costing. So if we go to the next section of costing, so I'm moving here from left to right, as I had said. The section on the far right now requires that the applicant indicate the timing and the breakdown of the cost items in each activity. So before, on the activity-based costing section, we were just saying overall, this is how much the adverts would cost. Now we're actually saying in terms of the timing and breakdown of that cost, we expect to spend all of that in month 1, or we expect to spend it over several months, whatever the case may be. So applicants are really required to split those funds into the respective months in line with how they will be spent when the project is finally implemented. And as with the previous section, this detail is to be included in the same row as the activity that it is associated with. So if we reflect now back to the results chain, what we've covered, we've done activities, outputs moving from left to right, and finally now we've done the costing. So I want to look at the outcomes now. And we need to move to unpacking. So what will the project actually achieve at the end of the day? So from row 117 onwards in tab 2, so in the ABC PIMP sheet, this section now houses the anticipated outcomes section. So this will then include the program indicators, so the National Youth Service indicators, those 3, you will see them listed there at the top of the slide. So that's the number of young people securing paid service opportunities, the number of young people who have completed planned service activities, and then finally the third one looks at the number of young people transitioning out of the National Youth Service into other opportunities. As mentioned earlier, under each activity category, applicants are required to identify a milestone indicator. So this milestone indicator then automatically gets pulled through into the section, and you'll see it there just in white under name of indicator halfway down the slide. The number is NYS, project indicator 1, number of candidates enrolled into the project. So that is pulled directly from my activities section. So it's automated, it'll automatically pull through. Any other project-specific indicators that your project wants to highlight and track, these are indicators that are specific to your project, to your intervention, and to your project model. You then add from NYS project indicator 7, which is near the bottom of the page. So there is room for the candidate to add additional indicators where they see fit to show impact beyond those 3 broad program indicators that we have for National Youth Service. So there is room to add additional indicators, additional items that you want to track in terms of capacitating young people and ensuring that they get a foot in the door and increase their employability. So anything like that, whether it's an indicator regarding the capacitation of the community as a result of the service work provided by young people. So it could be a whole range of items. So moving on there, when we reflect on the results chain mapping and the PIMP thus far, we've really then covered activities, outputs, costing, and now outcomes. But in addition, so we've covered the majority of the results chain, but we actually now need to further unpack the financial model in the project. So this is really done in the remaining 2 tabs, tab 3 and tab 4. So I'm going to go through the financing plan first. So this is tab 3. So in the financing plan, the applicant is required to illustrate how the project's costs will actually be financed. So will this be financed purely from grant funding, or is there also a matched funding element? The applicant must indicate exactly the amount of funding to be obtained under each category, and once again highlight the timing thereof. So if it's grant funding, you'll see that orange shaded cells at the top that refers to the grant funding. When will this grant funding be required to be dispersed as per the costs within your costing section? When will you need this money to be dispersed? In this particular instance, it's dispersed from month 1 to month 6. In addition, if there are other funding sources, so other categories of funding, for example, an in-kind contribution, those sections in the financing plan must then be completed and the detail provided on what this in-kind funding actually covers. And also when we expect to see those in-kind contributions, so the timing thereof. So this is really important for the project to show how the project's costs will be financed throughout implementation. So then moving on to tab 4, which is the funding allocation. This final tab is to be completed by the applicant and is really used to show which funding source is paying for what project expense. So this information is important during the implementation phase when we're assessing cash flow needs of a project relative to its overall budget. So all these sections will be further discussed and unpacked in the next section. We will be doing a bit of a case study and a project example. So we'll go into a lot more detail on what actually funding allocation tab entails, And there you'll actually go through a live demo of what you need to complete and where and why you're doing it, and the assumptions you need to use when completing this. So the final two tabs, which I just want to mention, are summary tabs, which are pulled from other tabs within the PIMP. So we've got the SCOA budget summary tab. This essentially pulls the full project budget and the timing of the drawdowns, and the expenditure each month. So going from month 1 all the way through to month 12, what will the expenditure be and what will the inflows be? So it pulls from the financing plan, so the funding inflows, and then the activity, output, cost, and outcome sheet. So that was tab 2. The second automatic summary is the project summary. So this final sheet just provides a high-level overview of project income and expenditure, as well as the anticipated outcomes. So this pulls from that project information tab, which I mentioned earlier. It's important that you keep that up to date and that you complete it fully. It also pulls from the activities, outputs, outcomes, and costing tabs, from the financing tab, and finally from the SCOA budget. So this is really a very high-level introduction to the PIMP and its functionality. It is an Excel-based tool. You saw from one of the first slides that it's quite an expansive tool, but it is easy to use. It's easy to navigate, and when my colleagues go through the detail, you'll be able to see more of that navigation as they go through it. So thank you very much.
Over to you, Mo.
Hi, Kat. Thank you very much. There is a question on match funding and additional funders that has been raised. Could I ask either Terence to then speak to that specifically before? I know, Terence, you were going to address this later on when we do the finance section, but can you just speak to that specifically?
Hi, Mo, thanks. Mosima, the answer to that question is no. You won't be disadvantaged if you can't match. However, I think what we're saying is that you will find that if you recall from the briefing sessions, there were specific limits on budget items, which were highlighted by my colleagues. And so what we are saying is organizations may supplement with their own funding. So in this training, we are also incorporating those. But to your question, short answer is no. I think is there another question, Mo? I think that was the question related to funding.
Yeah, that was the only one. There is also an issue around how complex the ABC PIMP is. Colleagues, after the tea break, we are going to take you on a step-by-step demo on completing the ABC PIMP. Please do not fret. We are going to go through the first part. So what Kath was doing was to give you an overview of the ABC PIMP and how it works, and to have an understanding of the logic behind the implementation tool. So myself and Terence later on, we will break down each section of the ABC PIMP, looking at the outcomes, and later on he will take you through the finance section. So you will have support on completing it. There is a question that keeps coming up. Eldon, I know you posted in the chat how to access the ABC PIMP. Can you speak to that?
Yes, Mo, thank you very much. So the ABC PIMP can be found, ABC PIMP Lite document can be found as a downloadable template within the online application form. So on the right-hand side, when you access your online application form, on the right-hand side, there is
right-hand side menu, there's a heading called Downloads, and the template that you will be looking for is the very first template in that download section. It's titled ABC PIMP Lite. And when you click on that particular link, it will allow you to open it and allow you to save it on your device. I hope that that gives a little bit more clarity. Also, when I come through onto my section around the navigation of the GMS system, I will then also further demonstrate that through the live demonstration.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I see Buhle has been able to access it. Zain, you will also update us in the chat if you have been able to access it. Colleagues, to be very practical in our training today and how particularly to complete the ABC PIMP, we have created a mock-up case study, which we will go through after the tea break. But before the tea break, we want to present that case study. And then I think Lerato did confirm that it has been emailed to you together with the presentation. So we will be using that specifically to help us navigate and complete the example of the ABC PIMP. So I think it's much easier because you now have it. We will be able to apply the examples together. Before we move to that, I'm going to ask Kath to come back again and take us through the description of the case study. And then we're going to take a break, colleagues. And we'll see how long Kath takes with the reading of the case study. And then we'll take a 15-minute break. So to just stretch and to have tea, and then we come back at 10:15. I think I just see a question pop up. I think Eldon, maybe after the tea break, but we'll chat about this, if possible, to actually demonstrate downloading the ABC PIMP. I know you were going to do that later on when you navigate GMS, but probably for the purpose of, I think there's a lot of nervousness around how to access it, where to find it, maybe to do that before when we start with the demo on the M&E section. Kath, over to you.
So this is a project example that the team have put together that will assist us in taking all of you through the ABC PIMP. So we'll have an illustrative example of a project, of a youth development project, and then we'll start to complete the ABC PIMP based on this particular project. So I'm going to just go through the project with you now. You were also emailed a copy of this project example this morning, so it should be in your inbox, but I'm just going to go through a few slides now so you can just get the gist of the project. After this, we'll have a short break where you'll also be able to read through the project example at your leisure. And then after that short comfort break, we're going to come back and get into the full PIMP demo. So this is an illustrative example. The project title is Sport for Youth Development Project. The lead applicant or partner is an NPO by the name of Football for Growth. They have partnered up with various implementing agents. We've got their 2030 Youth Community Development Growth Initiative, Skills for Soccer, JoJo Youth Sport Development, and Active Learning. So 5 implementing agents are involved in the project. They're going to be implementing in Gauteng, Northwest, and in Mpumalanga. When we look at the funding that they are requesting, they're requesting grant funding of 25 million, but they also have some in-kind match funding to give at just over 43 million. In terms of their expected project outcomes, as per the program indicators, they expect to enroll 3,000 young people who will then secure paid service activities. They're anticipating 2,250 young people to actually complete their full planned service activities. And they're also anticipating that 750 young people will transition out of the youth service and then into other opportunities, so whether learning or earning. So just looking at an overview of the project, Football for Growth is a registered NPO working in Gauteng, Northwest and Mpumalanga that uses sport, in particular soccer, as a development tool to empower young people and get them involved in the community. The organization implements projects that combine sports training with life skills and health education to better equip young people to make healthy and productive choices. Sport has been acknowledged as bolstering physical, psychological, emotional, and social well-being and development. In addition, sports plays a significant cultural role in communities around the globe and are powerful vehicles for achieving broader development goals, particularly for young people. In recent time, there is growing recognition that sport does not have to compete with other development priorities, but can instead be a powerful means for addressing them. So sources there, United Nations and USAID. Football for Growth is seeking to establish a new program which focuses on soccer and life skills education to young people in priority nodes in Gauteng, Northwest, and in Mpumalanga. For this initiative, Football for Growth will partner with 5 implementing agents that will assist in rolling out the initiatives in the 3 provinces. And the challenges young people face in these priority areas, from gender-based violence to poverty and joblessness, the aim is to use the program to create awareness of these social programs and to provide young people with opportunities to improve their skills while contributing to their communities in a positive way. So the program will give young people the opportunity to firstly learn and play a sport in locations where sports coaching is largely unavailable or unaffordable, be a coach and mentor to other young people, learn new skills, and gain work experience. In particular, the focus will be on encouraging girls and women to attend the programs and get involved in offering sports coaching or life skills training to other young people. So the target there is at least 70% of the participants will be female. The project will partner with 120 schools within the priority areas and offer sports coaching and life skills training to 72,000 learners. The project will recruit and train 1,500 soccer coaches and 1,500 life skills coaches and mentors who will offer this community service. Coaches will be engaged for 4 hours per day, Monday through to Thursday. During the first month, the 3,000 recruits will be trained, so train the trainer, so they are able to offer the community service as planned and to the required standard. In addition, they will also be able to access further support throughout the 6 months they are engaged in that service work. So working as a coach and mentor will give these young people a firm foundation of work experience that will give them a better chance of securing further earning or learning opportunities. In addition, Football for Growth will facilitate the registration of 3,000 young people to sayouth.mobi to link them to opportunities in their area, work closely with other organizations that will assist in the delivery of specific life skills training sessions, for example, guest lectures, which will cover household financial management, entrepreneurship, reproductive health, gender issues, motivational sessions, etc. So that is the project example. You also have that in your inbox. So please, during the break, feel free to read it again, because we will be engaging with this example after the short break. Thank you.